This one is about kind of coordinating among your camp and nominating just one candidate. This one is kind of a battle among everybody else in your camp for votes. And so there's a very different kind of strategy involved in these two. In the district races, the minor party candidates created a challenge for both major parties. For the KMT, James Song's party, the People First Party, has always posed a kind of alternative to them. And in this campaign, because the KMT was so unpopular, the PFP looked set to benefit quite a bit. In addition, there was the founding of this Minguodang, which is a kind of play on the KMT's Chinese name, Guomindang. They just switched the characters. They campaign on a kind of KMT alternative platform as well. They had some interesting, almost cultish aspects to their party organization as well. The New Party is actually a very old party, despite the name. It goes back to the early 90s. It has traditionally been the party of Chinese nationalists and mainlanders. And it saw potentially a resurgence in this election. There's a lot more interest in running with the New Party label in this election. And then the KMT has often had a problem with kind of renegade candidates who don't get the party's nomination running anyway in localities. And so there are lots of independents running as well. For the DPP, they faced some challenges from these new so-called third force parties. The New Power Party in particular, but there was also an alliance between this newly founded Social Democratic Party, which actually advocated policies that sound a lot like its name, and the Green Party, which is an environmentally focused party in Taiwan. And then the DPP's kind of splinter party, the Taiwan Solidarity Union, is a small ally that has traditionally been more pro-independence than the DPP. They were also fighting with the DPP for votes in several districts. There's a significant asymmetry in how well the two party camps coordinated. So on the DPP side, they actually struck a deal with all of these groups in several races to coordinate on a single candidate. And in many cases, those candidates won. So the New Power Party actually won 3 district seats when the DPP yielded those seats to them rather than run their own candidates. On the Pan-Blue side, this kind of coordination was almost non-existent. And so there are a bunch of cases, and this is the most prominent, where the district itself was clearly Pan-Blue, but the Pan-Blue side ran 2 or 3 candidates and split the vote, and the DPP candidate then won. This case is the former mayor of Taipei running for a legislative seat in Kee Lung, which is traditionally a very blue city. And he kind of parachuted in. He didn't have any connections to Kee Lung previously and hoped that this was going to be a safe seat. And it turned out it would have if he had unified the Pan-Blue vote behind him. But in the end, he actually lost a lot of votes to both a Minguodang candidate and a PFP candidate. And so the DPP did well in here. More generally, KMT candidates ran away from the party and from Ma Ying-jeou all over the island. So this picture was making the rounds on social media during the campaign. This woman is running for the legislature in a district in South Taiwan. And this is an ad that one of her opponents or somebody who doesn't like her put up with Ma Ying-jeou's picture on it, and it says, "I am Ma Ying-jeou, please support them." And prove that I'm not wrong. So all people had to do was put Ma Ying-jeou's picture next to the KMT candidates, and it was damaging. Another kind of
some of these people actually sue for libel.
Yeah, in fact, right. If they could find out who put this up, they could sue that person.
And they
there's
did.
another case. There are several instances of people running around actually putting the KMT logo on KMT posters. And you'll notice there's no KMT logo on here. She's trying to avoid hiding the fact that she's part of the KMT. And so just sticking a logo is technically defacing the poster. So the candidates themselves would get really mad about this. So clearly, KMT is a toxic brand in this election, right? It's damaging to all the candidates running under its label. On the DPP side, certainly not as bad, but interestingly, the DPP candidates also tended to play down their party affiliation. They did play up their connections with the frontrunner, Tsai, who is broadly popular and expected to win. So you see lots of flags and posters of people embracing Tsai, but only rarely do you see a DPP actual logo up in the corner, and it's usually pretty small. And so there's clearly some kind of effort to broaden the appeal of these candidates beyond their DPP base to swing voters. You can pick that up just by looking at the flags. Okay, so that's the districts. If we look at the party list vote, there's a huge number of parties relative to the historic baseline that qualified for the party list ballot, 18. And so there was an open question how viable these new parties would be. And particularly within camps, so the pan-green camp and the pan-blue camp, there's a big issue about whether which of the new parties to coordinate on. If you didn't want to support the DPP and you wanted to see one of these other new third force parties succeed, do you vote for the NPP or the Green SPD coalition or somebody else? And there were similar issues on the blue side as well. And so it's a big question, ultimately, what voters would do with this vote. So let me show you what they did. In the regular district races, the DPP actually won 49 constituencies. The KMT won only 20. And the New Power Party, which the DPP yielded these 3 seats to, actually won all 3 of those seats. And the most prominent, and this is probably the headline race of this election, is Freddy Lin, who's the lead singer in a heavy metal band in Taiwan. Came out, ran in Taipei City, and in a district that had traditionally been fairly safe for the KMT, pulled his hair back and took off the makeup and actually won in an upset, beating a longtime KMT incumbent. And so he's actually going to be in Taiwan's next legislature. We actually saw him on the street. We were just kind of standing there, and they turned around, and oh my God, it's Freddy Lin. There he is. Get a picture, Larry. So the New Power Party, I think, really exceeded most people, certainly my expectations about how well they would do in the districts. I thought they would run quite a ways behind the DPP, but the candidates they ran had some independent star power and actually did better, generally speaking, than people expected. In the Aborigine districts, there are 6 of these. It was more kind of status quo. The 4 KMT incumbents all won. There was 1 DPP challenger who won. She's the only woman ever to win an Aborigine seat for the DPP. And 1 independent incumbent won. The party list vote, existing parties actually got 80% of the total party list vote. So despite all the talk about this kind of emergence of a third force in Taiwanese politics, 80% of voters went with parties they already knew. And so if you're writing a narrative about this, I think the narrative that third force parties really came out in this election is a bit overblown. And in fact, the only parties to win seats in the new legislature, there are only 4: the DPP, KMT, PFP, and the former Taiwan Solidarity Union, which had seats in the previous legislature, did not pass the threshold, so they're out and they're replaced by the New Power Party. That's the main difference among the small parties, and it's almost a 1-to-1 replacement. So the dynamics among the parties are not going to be too different. They'll have different places. Certainly the DPP is now the majority party, but the number of parties hasn't increased in the legislature. And among the blue camp, the Minbo Dong actually did not do as well as people expected, or at least as well as I expected. And the Mew Party actually did get a lot of protest votes, but unfortunately for them, they were about 0.8 of a point below the threshold, and so they didn't get any seats. And so here's what the total picture looks like in the legislature. On the left, the outgoing legislature, elected in 2012, and on the right, big DPP majority in 2016. And here's, to give you a kind of idea of the geographic spreads here, thanks to Kharis Media, I've stolen this from them, because it's really good. You can see basically green south, but the real geographic story of this election is the DPP made huge inroads in New Taipei and Taipei City in a way that they've really never done before. I haven't had a chance to dig into the numbers yet to see really what that means in terms of kind of age cohorts and social standing, social classes, and so forth. But there's a clear geographic pattern here that is really interesting. So takeaways from this campaign, DPP cooperation with minor parties, I think, helped it avoid splits. It did come at the cost of yielding several winnable seats, and the New Power Party capitalized on that, and so there now will be a New Power Party caucus in the legislature, which can potentially give the DPP some trouble. They have a lot of independent minds in that party, and so the DPP may have some issues with this party on their flank. KMT incumbents did not do well in this election. There's a lot of experienced legislators who lost. And those close to Mahingja did especially poorly. There are very few who survived this tidal wave. And as I mentioned, the third force and other minor parties only played spoiler roles, really, except for the New Power Party. Some final thoughts about the election. Again, I would love to get into this more in Q&A, but let me draw some final conclusions. Just kind of stepping back and thinking about electoral practice in Asia and new democracies around the world, Taiwan is really good in terms of the way its elections are run, the way campaigns take place. If you were at our talk last fall, where we had a Korean scholar, Jong-sung Yo, talk about campaign restrictions in Korea, most of what happens on the street campaigning in Taiwan would be illegal in Korea. Taiwan is really kind of an exemplar of free speech and free mobilization in Asia. The campaign, the actual voting and counting take place very quickly, efficiently, and smoothly. So there's a new rule this year that you could actually photograph the counting of ballots. And the counting takes place in each polling station. So I actually went up into an Aborigine area outside of Taipei to observe the counting there. This is the polling station, and it's on the main street in this town. It's just a tarp, so people can go right in. This is Wulai for anybody who knows Taipei, Taiwan. Well, and so this is Wulai Laojie. This is right in the main street, and so you can actually just walk right by the polling station. It's all very, very transparent. And then right at 4, they close it, reorganize things, and then anybody who wants to can watch the counting. They're just standing behind this tape here. And so you can actually take pictures like this of the ballots. They hold up each one individually, and you can see who the ballot was actually cast for. So it's all very transparent. It's done. The entire results for the entire island are reported in about 4 hours after the polls closed. So just astounding by American standards. This is and so you know very quickly who won and who lost. And the error rate on this is like 1 to 2%, if that. So on those terms, Taiwan really looks good. On a more sobering note, turnout in this election was really low by Taiwanese standards. So it was even lower than the local elections in 2014. And a big part of this, undoubtedly, is a lot of disillusioned KMT, or at least Pan-Blue supporters, who said, screw it, I'm not going to the polls, I hate all of the choices I have this year. And they may come back into the electorate, or they may not. I don't know. But the turnout, the decline in turnout here is actually similar to the decline in turnout we see across a lot of other democracies around the world. And then finally, to end on a more uplifting note, this is really kind of the year of the woman in Taiwan. In addition to this first woman president, Taiwan elected about 38% of all legislators are women. And so this is one of the highest rates in the world as well. Not just in Asia, but around the world. We're close to like Scandinavia. And so Taiwan really is kind of an outlier in a good way on this number. So thanks.